this is a very sort of half-hearted fake. It's great. We saw a lot of these coming onto the market about 20, 30 years ago.
Chinese?
And no, they were done here, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I'm supposed to have met the artist, but I just can't quite recall that I did. But I'm supposed to have met this artist.
It's in the 18th century manner, is it?
Very much in the 18th century, primitive manner. These were very, very popular, certainly 20 years ago, extremely popular. And the great thing is that they are very decorative. You now see replicas of these, of course. But this one, of course, is actually a half-hearted fake, is what we've got to call this one, because it's been stained down a bit, but not much effort has been made. If we can zoom in where my thumb is here, you can see there's brand new canvas there. And if I just turn it on one side slightly, you can see brand new stretcher round the corner. It's a very cursory sort of going over to make it look a little bit older.
It's a pub painting.
It's a pub painting is what it is. And, you know, it's the kind of thing which, if people are a little bit aware, they can see that it's got cracking, but these bits about where we go right back to the beginning and we said, look at the edges of the picture, it's those little telltale signs that we really need to look at.
Well, after you pointed out a few of the early pictures, a viewer should know when that came up that would be a fake if they didn't know in advance.
That's true. I mean, today, if I can swap for the next one. Thank you very much, Natasha. That's lovely. Today, we talk a lot about the technical side of what we can do to discover fakes and age, etc. And a lot of people will have heard of ultraviolet light and more recently, well, obviously X-ray and infrared reflectography, which is becoming increasingly used today. This particular picture, this goes back to what you were saying earlier about 19th century fakes. And this one was probably by one of the great 19th century forgers. This is a wonderfully Turner-esque looking thing we've got here. And it looks absolutely spot on for Turner, the right sort of colours, beautifully aged back. It was painted originally on panel. You can see a little bit of the original panel just up here where the paint has flaked off. But what's happened here is that somebody feeling this was, in fact, I confess it was my father, who had this picture for many years, was convinced that it was J.M.W. Turner. And I could never be quite as convinced. And he went to a very expensive extent of having this taken off the very bowed panel that it was on and having it put onto stuff called aircraft aluminium honeycomb, which is there, and then a beautiful handmade box around it, if I can just hold that still. And this box covers up the aluminium because painting stuck on aluminium don't look too
yeah, of course,
so
yeah.
A little bit of an issue. So you say with something like this, we have a 19th century picture here. This is probably by a guy called either R or J. Paul, and he seems to have been an amazingly colourful character who thought he'd murdered someone in a pub and decided to flee to London from Norwich. And it gets quite mixed up as to whose story we actually believe in this. Some of it may be apocryphal and some of it may be true. And he's supposed to have set up as being a dealer in the East End of London, in Cheapside, and painting all these Turner and Constable lookalikes. And in fact, there's a possibly apocryphal story about Turner walking past the window of his establishment and seeing 3 of his paintings all in the same canvas, which he thought was quite interesting, whether that actually ever happened or not. Okay. And this is probably by him, because Turner is now he'd become so famous, lots of people wanted them. They were valuable even then. Of course, they're enormously valuable today. And so lots of copies existed of Turner. Now, with this one, you'd say, well, okay, how would you find out that this is not a Turner? Well, we don't have to go to the full extent of X-ray and reflectography, because it sort of falls at the first hurdle, which is particularly in this area here, if we concentrate down on the right. These sort of wonderful, almost matchstick, doll-like figures. Turner wasn't actually the greatest figure painter in the world, but he was a good deal better than than this little group here. It looks like the wooden tops. Yes. You have to be of a certain age to know that. But it's okay, and it's certainly done by someone who knows how to paint, but it's not by Turner. So we don't have to go to the next stage. It's a 19th century painting. It's not signed Turner. Is it a fake? Probably was sold as a fake. Well, not as a fake, but probably was passed off as being the real thing at some time. Certainly when my father bought it, he thought it was. And there are a lot of these around. But now, of course, you sort of say, well, it's not by Turner if you know the artist quite well. It's got age, etc., and it would be hard for the layperson to be able to tell whether it was right or not. It's not actually, as I say, signed or pretending from that point of view. But I think almost certainly if it is Paul and it was sold in his gallery, he probably would have tried to pass it off as being Turner.
I bought one at my auction, and it said Turner, had the little badge of Turner there. The person who'd had it before had the alarm wires literally screwed into the back of the frame. Wonderful. And everything else. And it looks beautiful. I gave it to my mother-in-law. She's over the moon with it. I said it's not a Turner, but it is in the Turner style. But it looks
and there are lots
Venetian,
of them.
The Venetian canal scene. You know.
We'll be coming to one in a second that we're doing. But one thing we do hear quite a lot about is ultraviolet light. And we're just going to have a little look here at a picture which this particular painting has been restored. Now, from the image that we can both see here, the picture looks perfectly reasonable, doesn't look as if it's showing any damage. But we flick to the next image.
It's got a beard.
Well, it kind of looks like it. It's Movember, perhaps? I don't know. It's what she's done. What's happened here is that this is restoration, and the blue cast that you can see over this is obviously the ultraviolet light. And what the ultraviolet light is doing here is it's showing up more recent paint. We've probably got two lots of recent paint here. You can see some vague outlines of sort of spidery scribbles.
By the chest.
On the chest, and particularly on the upper part of the cheeks, around the eyes. But then we see some really dark blobs around the mouth there. This is where more, where heavier.
Is it later? Would it be later or just
yes,
heavier?
Yeah.
Later.
And this is definitely later repainting that's happened here. It's not been completely over-painted, which is another expression you hear a lot. That would sort of end up looking almost black, the whole thing, if that had happened. It is restoration, maybe a little bit more than is necessary. That means to say that the damage on the chin may be really very small, but in order to try and match in the paint, they've gone a bit further over it than they should. Today, most restorers would just pinpoint and retouch the bits that they needed that they need to do most.
But it's a good job on the. If you go back to the last picture, you can see.
Oh yes,
it's beautiful.
You can. I mean, you can't really see it at all. It's been well done.
There's
certainly.
a little bit less.
Yes.
There's a little bit less cracking there. Little things you pointed out now. You're looking for. So
exactly it. That's just what we were going to look.
You can see.
And so this goes back to just what we were saying earlier. If the cracula is missing, then we're a little bit suspicious. Not that it's a fake, but that certainly you're dealing with an area that's not original paint. We can see very evenly that cracking down there. But you're right, when you come to the base of the chin here, it disappears. And that means that there's been some restoration on it. So with fakes, we can sometimes see them where they're enhanced. So they might not have started off as a fake, but somebody gets hold of it and thinks, I can alter this and make it look more like the artist that I want it to be. This has happened a lot recently with Russian pictures, particularly Russian 20th century pictures.
Big prices.
And I was hoping to bring one along for you today, but in actual fact, the police have taken it, so I couldn't bring it with me. It's going to be used in a forthcoming case. And we're seeing a lot of that coming in, whereby they've often bought pictures in Scandinavia, etc., where the style is quite similar to Russian painting. Well, obviously, Russian painting at the moment is very, very valuable for an awful lot of the painters. And it seems that there was a little group of people in England who were buying these pictures and enhancing them, shall we say, to make them look more like a great master of the late 19th century in Russia, and then putting them into auctions and selling them. And some of which made very considerable money in the last sort of 5 years. Okay. They've quite a few of them gone through. Now, in looking at some of those, the one that I was going to bring today, that one is quite obvious under ultraviolet light, where the changes have been made, and you get that similar thing that we've just saw here.
And so forth.
And so you could see where it had been enhanced. You can see
where would you get that done? I mean, for the viewer, if they had a painting, they had a few. Now they've seen you describe a few things, and they've got a bit of a warning signs.
You can buy very good battery ultraviolet lights now.
Like the £20 note checker sort of thing.
Yes, okay. They're very good from that point of view. But people mustn't be scared of something having a little bit of retouching, because as we've seen that, I would have that redone now so that wasn't so obvious. You clearly spotted it there. And but it's not trying to pretend anything. It's just a repair that makes the picture
more beautiful.
More beautiful, which is the main point. And if I may take the next one, I'll pass that one over.
Do you want to pass that one back to Natasha as well at the bottom?
Oh yes, I will.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha.
So with something like this, you probably need to go a little bit further in exploring. This picture is, in actual fact, a famous picture by Bonington, Richard Parkes Bonington. And I don't think this is at all was meant to be a fake. Because on the back, we've got another one. And
two for the price of one.
This is the sort of thing which we were talking about, where people copied things. In the lifetime of that artist, this is going to be a little bit later. Bonington dies very, very early on, in the just after the first quarter of the 19th century. And here, so this is someone who's a great admirer of Bonington's, and they've painted these as an homage, really, to the artist. I don't think these were ever meant to be passed off as being him. There's no signature on there. It's not really a fake, it's a copy. Okay. This is a copy. The one
just
on the back.
Just an earlier, like the Claude Monet, but without the signature.
Yes, without the signature. This one's sort of partly cleaned down through here, but it's just a perfectly decorative picture. You don't need to go to the extent of looking deeply into it.
And what would that cost? Sort of
something like that.
£300-400?
A couple of £300, £200-300 for something like that, just because it's decorative. So we swap that for the next one. Lovely. And this is where, thank you, we need to come into rather more detail into how one looks at things. And this, of course, a number of viewers will have noticed, this is clearly supposed to be the work of Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot. And there's the wonderful expression about him of the 4,000 odd pictures or 3,000 odd pictures he painted in his lifetime. 6,000 are in New York alone. And that can be said of a number of painters, but he was a hugely copied and forged artist in his own lifetime, because this particularly the end of the 19th
due to his style
century,
or due to his popularity?
Yes, his popularity. He was very desirable from a lot of American collectors. Bought them in his lifetime, and just after his death, they would go to Paris on the Grand Tour. The Grand Tour, of course, was responsible for a lot of these things, and they would go to somewhere and find a Corot and take it home. And this one was in a museum for a while. It was on loan to a museum. If we can, I'm not sure if the light's good enough, but just where my finger is here, we have the signature. We have Korres Signature. And this seems to be, done at the same time as the rest of the painting. The colours we can test. So you put an ultraviolet light over this, it doesn't show up as being later. So the technique we've just used doesn't work on this one. Okay, so you think, well, that then has been put on at the same time as the rest of it. This, you then start to have to try and test the colours. And in this one, we did take a little tiny piece out of it, got the colours tested it with something else in the picture. Sure enough, they came back as being similar paints, but they weren't too sure how old they were. And the interesting thing is about this, we've got a beautiful patinated, dirty surface. And indeed, Corot, when he started painting these things, he did use a patinated varnish himself, because he liked that slightly sort of browny, warm look tone that it gave to things. It's well painted, this. If we switch it around, we've got a lovely early stretcher, complete with original cobblers. I hope you like them. And this is a very good quality stretcher we've got at the back. It's been relined where the canvas has been put onto another canvas because of perhaps a little damage at some stage. And everything here looks right. The moment you see a stretcher as beautifully made as this on the back, you think someone's taken care of this picture. Yeah. They've spent money on this painting. When we looked at that Sisley at the beginning, it was a very cheap, chunky stretcher. This is really good stuff here, and it leads you to feel the quality of what's on the front of it. So, what we have here is we have a picture that is painted over an older painting. So, they've bought what may be quite a good early painting. Underneath here, we've got some cracking, etc., just right, as it should be, through this painting. But underneath here is something else. And it's going to be an earlier painting, and it might be the sad, toothless uncle who nobody liked. Quite often they are.
Is that where you've rubbed it at the top corner?
You can just see some of the dark underneath showing through. And so traditionally, we've gone to using X-ray at this type of work. But now we can also use a process called infrared reflectography. And so we're just coming to that now. Now here is a picture. We recently bought this painting. This is how we bought it. It's a beautiful painting. When I bought it, I thought it was by one artist. I only saw a very small image of it on my phone, and was sent to me. But a good friend of mine looked at the picture. He said it's interesting, but there's some odd bits about it. You see the cracking we've got in here. Yeah. We've got very similar type of cracking in the centre of that picture, right where the waterfall is. Very similar sort of thing. Now, infrared reflectography can, to an extent, look through that. And here we have the same painting. Now, I'm going to flick back. Spot the difference. Wow. All this is has been repainted. So what we're looking at here is we've already had some paint removed from the top here, but what we're looking at here is what was revealed underneath of the original painting. Now, under here, we're almost certainly probably got a toothless ancestor. Here, this is not a forgery. We do not understand why this was changed so dramatically.
Can we go back again?
Yeah, we will.
Wow.
Now, you can just make out in the centre a slightly curious archway, which doesn't seem to make any sense with the rest of the painting. So the reflectography allows us to be able to see part of the way through the paint. And it has another aspect, which we'll just come to in a second, but that is the bridge that was underneath. And absolutely beautifully painted. As I say, this was probably changed because there's another version of this picture. There's another 2 versions of this picture. And it's possible that someone thought, oh, then mine's a copy, but it's not a copy. And they altered it to make it slightly different. And the reason why we know it's not a copy is because if we go to a close-up infrared reflectography, can you see these lines that exist, that are going right the way through? Now, the funny thing is, if we just flick back, you can't see those lines really. There's one line along the little pediments like there, crease, yeah. But we've got a lot more lines here. Reason for that? It's the artist changed the picture. He actually changed the line. He didn't like it. So he moved the bridge because he didn't think the perspective was right. That tells us that in actual fact we're dealing with something which is almost certainly the first one. This is the prototype. So because we see these changes, pentiments, or they're often referred to, because we see these changes, it makes us feel that we're really looking at the real thing, because if he was just copying, well, he wouldn't bother because he'd copy it direct from that. So in essence, although we haven't done the infrared reflectography under here or the X-ray, we're expecting someone fairly toothless and pretty ugly to be underneath there. But sometimes you can get these ones which are just bizarre, and you can't explain as to why this was done. It can only really be something along the lines of trying to pretend. Now, this is just a restorer's shot, so here you can quite clearly see the paint is being removed here. So we've got cracked paint here, which still means it's old, but it's not as old as what's underneath.
And have you cleaned that off for the old picture? Is that what you've done?
You're about to see it.
Oh, wow.
That's it, completely cleaned down. There's no restoration done on this yet. It's not, I say completely cleaned down. Can you see a curious sort of corner missing square in the sky, and another little bit to the right there? That's still to come off. There's a little blob above the guy with the donkey at the back. But the quality of this thing is astonishing. So that's what we started with.
It's so much better when you've taken off the waterfall.
And that's how it looks now. So
you enhanced the value?
Yes, very considerably. Very considerably in this case. And it is that aspect whereby it was never supposed to be a fake. It's possible that change was done because somebody who didn't know the artist's working practice, he may have thought, oh my goodness, I've seen another one of those, so mine must be a copy. So if I change it, it's another version, which is something you'll have heard many times. And so we think, because the changes were done well, but they were everywhere, right across the picture. They changed even the colour of her dress. Wow. Can you see the reds being taken off now on her dress? But that dress, if we flip just back finally to the next one, it was completely red. Even the figures completely repainted. So
this must have taken a long time for you.
It would have taken a long time to restore. Yes, it's still going on. It should be ready in a couple of months' time, and we can't wait for the finished article.
Wow.
But here is a situation, a very rare situation, although it illustrates the
Who's the
infrared.
artist?
This is by Vernet, Claude Vernet.
Okay.
And
date-wise?
we think he did certainly 3, if not 4 versions of this picture. We think this one's from the 1750s.
Okay.
There's one in the Ashmolean Museum, which is from the 1770s, exactly the same subject. And there's another one in France. It's possible there's another version in America, but we haven't managed to trace that.
Well, what a great find for you.
So it's a great find, but here is something where somebody's gone to alter it for possibly a nefarious purpose. But in actual fact, there was no need, because the picture was always genuine. So it doesn't always work out. So we've got 2 things that started off as being quite, this is of course complete repaint, because we've got a very different picture underneath. Here is a picture that's been dramatically altered. But it just gives to show a little bit of what infrared reflexography can do.
Well, Tony, thank you very much. You've given us a real insight into the art world and the fakes and forgeries on the art world, basically, and I really thank you for that. Tony's going to give us a little bonus 10 minutes on a Van Gogh, or is it a Van Gogh or is it not a Van Gogh, which we will which will be underneath this video when this is finished. But thank you very much for watching Tony Roberts from Cider House Galleries on The Artful Dodger, Fakes and Forgeries in the Art World. Tony, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next Antiques Masterclass in 14 days. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.